Let's go!
And this might be a little challenging to do, but we're gonna figure it out as we go along. I wanna rate the guest characters, my dude, and I wanna start with like current time and move backwards because we sort of have like the modern perspective on what's cool and what's hitting and what is neat and the way that character was pulled off. As an example, what is the best modern game that we can do that properly represents guest characters that are released and are being released? First and foremost, obviously it's MK1. These two characters over here, I don't think it's fair to rate them particularly. I don't think that's particularly fair. So this is only going to be a rate the guest character in terms of a, let's say, actual gameplay perspective. Like we've seen what these characters play like, you know what I mean? And clearly, you know, if I'm going to give Ghostface a rating, this bitch is pretty fun. I'm going to give him a fairly high grade. If we're going to start on this rating, dude, Ghostface is pretty sick. I was actually fairly surprised at how much fun he is. And they go really ham with his gameplay concepts. He looks great. The performance of the character all looks super good. But this is a good starter because I think he's an 8. I don't think it's an insanely like, boom, like the impact of this character, how crazy it was that they were in here. That was kind of like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. I hope it's fun, right? I hope they're fun. But to me, it's like, in combination with how they represented Ghostface, 8 out of 10. Shocked how much I enjoyed him. So we can't go straight to MK11. Street Fighter 6. Our good friend Terrence McBoyland. I would say Street Fighter 6, Terry, as a guest character, technically the first guest character in the history of Street Fighter, is pretty high up there. Maybe not the best competitively, but I don't know if I give a shit enough where he's so much goddamn fun. The amount of like love, care, and attention put into the guy, I could talk for hours, but again, how much I've gushed about him, wanted to get him to master, wanted to keep playing him, all this stuff. My dude, I think I put this bitch at like a 9.5. Is it absolutely top tier for me? Not the toppest tier, but it is really up there. Mortal Kombat 1 Season 1 pass. I do not think this was a particularly super powerful guest list to start. It started sort of like super dickheads, anti-heroes. I think I'd give Omni-Man about a 6, just in terms of like gameplay was good. Everything was good, but was it like super powerful and, you know, their existence is making the game that much more valuable? I don't know. Homelander, I'd also argue, is like also a 6. I think gameplay wise, maybe a 6.5. I think gameplay wise, much more interesting, right? Just in terms of where they were going. I don't know the shows though. Exactly. This ain't your fucking list. For Peacemaker, I will give them credit. Clearly the most fun one, and started off disgustingly busted because they were just nothing but fun. All of the characters in here hover between like a 6 and at tops maybe like a 6.5. Nothing really screams in the same way that previous guests have in Mortal Kombat games, much less like Injustice games, that blow your mind, where it's like, whoa, that character's here? Holy shit, you know? But I think there is some resounding evidence in their gameplay that makes me very happy. That is like, oh, it's really cool that these characters are here. You know what I mean? I'm sure that some people for Homelander, for Omni-Man, and for Peacemaker that put these guys at like an 8, a 9, or a 10. Do I think that really reached that far? My dude, I don't know, man. They didn't really seem to change too many opinions on MK1 in general when they came out. So this is almost like unfair because this chick has shown up a multitude of times with a very similar situation. So going backwards, Grand Blue, 2B. And it's close to being perfect. I'd argue that her execution and the way she looks, and I don't know if I love the way she played, just in general. She's very weird. She was like piloting a friggin' helicopter is what I described it as. But I think in terms of reaction and appropriate to the game they're showing up in, seemed perfect. Where it's like, damn, that's a really good call. I give this one a 9 out of 10. Not entirely a 10 out of 10. I'm gonna have to investigate some of my thoughts when we look at her again, because obviously Soul Calibur is 6, but you know, I'm gonna give 2B at least in this, about a 9 out of 10, just because of how gorgeous the character looked in the art style and how friggin' beautiful Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising is as a game. But I don't know if I absolutely loved her gameplay. I don't know if I love the way she played. Let's do Smash right now because we're in comparable time frame. Let's just do it. Smash is all guests, not entirely, confidently speaking. I can also give you the perspective of guest characters in Smash going all the way back to Brawl when it started because we were obviously there. I could tell you which ones were like, you know, mind-breaking when this shit happened. Smash Ultimate Roster. Now again, I am going to say that this is characters outside of the respective Nintendo archetype. Characters that would not have inherently had a chance of being in Smash. I know there's like a billion Fire Emblem characters. I ain't gonna rate that shit. That doesn't make any sense to me. Guest characters are characters that have not really existed in this franchise before leading up to this point. So like, yeah, Banjo and Steve and all that kind of shit and Sora and stuff. Yeah, big deal. These got to be real guest characters. Let's just quickly go through this shit. Snake was one of the craziest guest characters ever in a game. As much as even something like Sonic the Hedgehog, which I would give probably a 9.5 because it was like, oh my God, a Sega character is making it into Smash. That sort of makes sense. We get a Mario versus Sonic game. Cool. To me, that's still a 9.5 because Sonic feels like he belongs in a game like Smash Brothers. But when Brawl had Snake come out of that friggin' box in the first trailer, nothing was off the table anymore. Like, Solid Snake was not anywhere close to Nintendo stuff outside of like the GameCube and having Twin Snakes. I get it. But being put into something like Smash, it was like, oh God, we're going here now? So to me, Snake is like absolutely legendary. Blew the heads off so many people in the time frame. Granted, the NES, you know, I'm thinking of around the time of these games being released. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10, ultimate high tier guest character, gold stars and shit. And as much as I personally would be like, God damn, dude, Mega Man's in fucking Smash. I lost my fucking mind. Crazy. I think with like perspective, that also makes perfect sense. Mega Man gets the exact same rating as Sonic, like a 9.5. Just because it's like, oh my God, we're doing it. Like all of the characters are like all the classic characters we know and love are sort of here and we're good, you know? This wasn't mind bending like a Snake where it's like, what the shit is going on? This was just a wonderful preservation of a classic character that hadn't been around in a lot of time. Really high consideration, but does not hit legendary status. Pac-Man gets an 8. Cool. How the hell do you turn this weird 2D Bite Man into something? I don't know, man. It was okay. I'll give him an 8 because if we go to the right a little bit more, here's my only defense of like Ryu and Ken. And Ken gets kind of a low rating, excited, but like a 7, I'd say a 7 to a 7.5. I don't really love the way these characters play in this game, personally speaking, mostly because in 4-player mode, they're really weird. They're kind of designed for like 1v1 because that's where their legacy is. But I personally do not love the way Ken and Ryu kind of play in their execution in Smash. But at the same point, Ryu probably gets an 8 and Ken gets like a 7.5 simply for the fact that it's like, oh, we had an idea that this could happen, right? We clearly knew that this was potentially a thing. Very exciting, super cool, but my dude, I have like a list of like 5 characters in Smash that I play constantly. And guess what? I never really play Ken just because I do not love the way they personally play. So they're not crazy high. Also, Ryu was following another guest character in the same time frame of impossibility, where it's just like, holy shit, this is happening. And the problem is, I think Ryu came after Cloud, and this shit was impossible. He's a Sony character. What is happening? Does not even belong in Smash Brothers. Cloud is really up there, in my opinion. 10 out of 10, insanity. There's no way this shit is happening. There's no way. Was Ryu before Cloud? Was diminished for some reason. Why is Ryu showing up in this game not exciting to me nearly as much? Oh, was he leaked? That might have had an impact on it. I am definitely thinking of it vice versa in my head. That's unfortunate because that's having an impact on my overall rating. Cloud's a 10 out of 10. Is there any argument? Holy shit, man. Like this character had never really been on anything related to Nintendo at all. This shit was an impossibility. Even a higher impossibility than something like Snake, because Snake at least was on the previous generation of systems. Bayonetta. Bayonetta did have Bayonetta 2, which was a Wii U game, which did precede Smash Brothers. This was very exciting, clearly exciting, and obviously would be an amazing character for Smash, but she effectively was a first-party character kinda in this time frame. Belonged to Sega, but also only exclusively on Nintendo. So to me, Bayonetta was like a 9 out of 10 of just like, wow, you know, like this is really cool. But to be real, it seemed like this was sort of gonna be something that likely would happen. The only thing preventing it was that she was too sexy. Too big, too sexy. Common Smash reasons why characters couldn't show up. Simon and Richter, really cool. But it also, I feel in the time frame, people were kind of asking for Castlevania representatives, where it's like, yeah, a Castlevania character could show up here. Doom guy could show up. Like that sort of conversation was happening around this time frame. I'll give the Castlevania boys like an 8. Also an 8 in terms of just like excitement relatively like into this sort of thing. And that might be just because I was not a super big Castlevania head, but I was like, that's really cool, right? It's cool that they're here. Joker, this might actually be a 10, even though it's not a character that I'm gonna play and from a series of games that I'm really into, but my God, man, like the Persona games were nowhere close to Nintendo platforms at this time. To me, this sort of deserves an overall 10 because it's not anything we were expecting. We never saw it coming, is all I'm gonna say. It deserves a 10. Does this also count? Dragon Quest, right? I give it an overall like a 7. I don't know. And I think that's just because I am so disconnected from Dragon Quest as a franchise. I think for me personally is like a 7, but I think for others it could be much higher because Dragon Quest had not had a huge representation on Nintendo for a while, clearly started on that platform, you know what I mean? You know, there was a lot of other smaller games that showed up on other platforms. Banjo-Kazooie, can't really talk about it, Nintendo character, exciting, but you know. Terrence McFucking Boylan. I have to give it a 10. I personally have to. In Smash Brothers? In this game? In this economy? My dude. What the shit? It was the beginning of Buff Pokemon Trainer. It was the beginning of Terry's rise to power. He eventually becomes president of the United States, my dude. This is where it starts. This is the beginning of the Terry rise to power. Yeah, I have to give Smash a 10. Because it was clearly like a love letter, and then Street Fighter sort of followed suit and all that kind of stuff. People didn't know who the fuck Terry was. People don't know what the fuck King of Fighters is or Fatal Fury. Like, this was the thing that sort of allowed this to happen. It began this, you know? Moving on. Steve! And as much as I don't want to give it a 10 out of 10, it's a fucking 10. And it's the last thing I wanted. And it's the acceptance that, like, yeah, this bitch broke the internet. He broke Twitter when it happened. As much as I'm that disconnected from Minecraft and have never played Minecraft, I'm not a dumb bitch. I know that this is a massive deal. It's something that I care about entirely in the negative, but still, I know how big of a deal it is. I'm not that stupid. It deserves a 10. I'm not gonna get all excited about it the same way I'm gonna talk about Terry, because the next character we're talking about is fucking Sephiroth! If anything, there could have been a billion other Final Fantasy characters that they put in here, right? There was no reason for them to put Sephiroth. Zero reason. Who the hell was gonna slice open that hand or whatever that shit it was in the sky, the stupid funky archangel horse shit? Whatever that could have been anything. We're like, is it Virgil? That makes more sense than fucking Sephiroth. Like, what the shit, dude? So that's nuts. That's still crazy that this stuff is that much of a Sakurai fever dream. It's a 10. Nobody thought that shit was gonna happen. To me, it was almost more unexpected that it was another friggin' Final Fantasy VII character. It was like, what the fuck is happening? Crazy. 10 out of 10. Legendary status. For me, like fucking legendary. Pyra and Mithra. Technically Nintendo. I'm not counting it. Kazuya. Fairly surprising. I think there could have been several other Bandai Namco representatives that could have been put in here. And while it maybe not entirely the most ultimate Tekken character you would have wanted, I think a lot of people would have wanted Jin or thought Heihachi, but I think from Harada's perspective, Heihachi has been guest characters in other things before. So they didn't do that. They were like, oh, let's do a character that has not been a guest character in things. Let's do Kazuya, because he hasn't actually shown up in a ton of stuff outside of like Cross Tekken, you know? So to me, it is pretty cool. It is actually like, wow, putting Kazuya in here, that's a good call. I think that's actually better than Jin in the long run, just because of what Kazuya represents, like the ultimate bad dad. Throw your kid off cliffs of the other ultimate bad grandpa that has been already used several times. So it's like, oh, I get it. And I love the way they use that, and they teased it in his trailer and shit. To me, it's a 9. The only other Bandai Namco thing that would have made a higher number for me personally would have been a Soul Calibur representative. Nightmare would have been the Soul Calibur representative. And granted, Soul Calibur did end up being the franchise we wanted it to be in the long run. That's the only thing that would have made me like flip my shit, is if like Nightmare was in Smash in some way. It would like, whoa. Do I even need to say anything about Sora? There are like 4 absolutely massive legendary, this shit's impossible, no way it'll happen, guest characters in Smash. And to me, that's Snake, that's Cloud, that's Sephiroth, and that's Sora. Sora might be like one of the biggest ones. Where I can understand with Steve, yeah, it's Minecraft. Dude, how are we going to ignore Minecraft? Like 10 plus years of the biggest shit ever. People that grew up with Minecraft are in their like early 50s now and shit. It's been around for so long. Sora was so tied down from litigation and licensing that this was like, it's impossible, bro. Yeah, I get it. Everybody wants this shit, and it would be really cool. And there's no way it's gonna happen. You're not gonna get every single side of that side of the industry, much less Disney, to sign off on this shit. There's no way that's happening. And then we learned, oh, probably a lot of the budget of the game went into making that happen. This didn't break the internet the same way that Steve did, but anybody that knows this shit was not gonna happen. And this was sort of a dedication from Sakurai, much less the Smash team, that like, no, that's what we spent our money on. We spent this on making the impossible actually possible. Obvious 10 out of 10. So that's Smash, and that's a lot of games, so we don't have to cover the other Smash games. So Baiken and Samurai Showdown. Really excited for it. I think, to me personally, this lands at around a 9 out of 10. Just because Samurai Showdown, and I feel like I couldn't be that excited for it in general because Samurai Showdown just ran like such shit. And it wasn't the ultimate game for me personally. It's kind of a very specific sort of game, but it's cool. It just makes sense. 9 out of 10. A lot of people are happy. Arcs aside, you know, getting some comeuppance, and she fits perfectly in this shit, you know? I'm about to remind you this happened. You're reminded that this happened. The Warden from For Honor was added to Samurai Showdown. All right. You forgot about For Honor, man. At least gets a 5 because it's unexpected. I definitely thought it could have been maybe a character with a face or a personality in some way. It's all right. It's not going to be a 1. I'm at least going like, huh, that's interesting. I at least have that sort of response. You know what I mean? So that's all I'll give that one. So this also happened in Samurai Showdown, and I just have no clue, dude. She's from a MOBA, Honor of Kings. Oh, so she's from some like mobile MOBA game. This one definitely comes across as specifically an exchange of like market research and shit. Granted, I'm assuming a lot of people play it, but we also have to assume that a lot of the folks that are playing those games aren't entirely going to play Sam Show. This would be like an Angry Bird showing up in Samurai Showdown. And I go, what? Okay. Granted, she looks like she belongs in the world of the game. So I'll give it like a 4. At least a 4 out of 10, but I'm so unfamiliar that it's like, what the hell? A lot of shit in Mortal Kombat 11, and this was a massive guest character game, my dude. Very, 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 very big deal guest character game. And I was there for all of it. So straight up, Spawn, sick as shit. Probably, I'd end up saying a 9.5 just because we have the consideration of like the game he's in. My biggest issue, and the only reason Spawn does not get a raw 10, because he has been a desired character in a fighting game ever since Soul Calibur 2, is that visually preserving everything that makes the character, like keeping all of that shit the way that shit is, yeah, awesome. So cool. It was not that much fun to play, and that's my biggest issue, is that when it comes to some of these characters, like I did not love the way Spawn's gameplay inherently was. And that is sort of my issue with him. I would like to give him a raw 10 out of 10, but I still had the feeling that like, oh dude, this guy's in the wrong game, you know? So I give him like, you know, like a proper, I'd say it's about a 9 overall in total. The Joker just kind of made sense, where it's like, oh, we're taking the Joker from like, obviously an Injustice. They've used this stuff before. We were already expecting that we were going to get some crossover, cross-pollinization because what happened in Injustice, moving forward from, you know, NRS games in general. So Joker was like, I'd say like a 7, maybe like a 7.5. I'd argue maybe even an 8 because I think the way the execution was, he was more fun than Spawn in my opinion. RoboCop was really exciting. And it was neat that, wow, RoboCop, he's going to look amazing, but we all knew what he was going to play like. So ultimately, I think RoboCop boils down to being something close to probably a 6, just because right from the get-go, we knew that's like, oh yeah, RoboCop seems like a cool idea for a fighting game, but as soon as you think of what it is and which game he's going to show up in, it's like, so I end up putting him like about a 6. Rambo, I'd also argue is like maybe a 7, just because of unexpectedness, like, whoa, we're going there. It's still kind of meh. Granted, a little bit more fun, and I would be a little bit more enthusiastic for Rambo in general just because it's like Stallone. So it's like, okay, that's neat. I think I personally was about a 7-ish in terms of feeling there. Arnie, though, I wish I could put higher than an 8.5. I think having Arnie actually truly in a fighting game represented, not his voice. Ah, damn it, that's right, he didn't have his voice. And, oh no, it's an 8. I have to bring it down a bit. It's cool, but ultimately the execution of everything therein, I think I had some fun with Terminator just in general. it didn't hit in every single way it needed to. I'll give Terminator an 8 overall. That's Mortal Kombat. Soul Calibur 6. Quite a few characters eventually made it into SC6, right? Quite a few. We're back to 2B, right? No, wait. We need to start from the start. Jerry in Soul Calibur 6 was the character they used as their front of the box bait to pull in a whole bunch of folks that might not be into Soul Calibur, but would still be like, you have the same console, right? Just come on over. I get exactly what they were going for, but I do not think Jerry was it. I always felt that this does not seem like the hero character of the game. Like, they're really going for it. This game's just popular and a lot of people are here, so we're gonna try to make Geralt the main dude, but I just never really felt enthusiastic about it. I always hoped that it was going to lead to that direction, but now we ultimately know it didn't really. So I kind of give him like a 7. 2B, in Soul Calibur, I'll give a 9. I didn't like the execution visually, although I like some gameplay stuff a bit more in 2B and Soul Calibur. I'll give her a 9 here because it was pretty close to release of Nier. And it was like, oh, like right around this time frame, that's really surprising, but also makes perfect sense, you know, kind of thing. So Haomaru, awesome, right? Great. How Soul Calibur crossing over, Samurai Showdown stuff going left, right, back and forth. You know, there's all this cross-pollination in this time frame between Bandai Namco and SNK and Arc System Works. Cool. I like How. And I think he's one of the sickest characters, and I love his iteration in this game. But he's an 8. He's a perfect match for Soul Calibur. The biggest issue I have is that Mitsurugi exists, and I know, I get it, they are different characters. I grew up with all of these games and these characters. I understand it. But ultimately speaking, there's a bit of overlap there, where it's like, oh, we're doing this too? Okay. To me, that was an interesting choice. I really felt like they could have gone in a different direction. But ultimately speaking, the only other character in Samsho that could have held up as a guest character in another game would have maybe been Genjiro. That's a much different character than Haomaru ends up being. You know, and I think, like, obviously other picks would have been really cool too, but none of the other picks like Galford and stuff or Ukyo even have that sort of like lasting identifiability. Like, this bitch was in Capcom games and shit, you know what I mean? Ultimately, I understand why they did it. I don't exactly agree with it, and I think it just ends up being an 8 overall. In the same time frame, this happens. Ryu and Chun-Li in Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. This is about an 8.5. Why an 8.5, you say? And there's a good reason. It was very expected. In this time frame, I think I had talked about this a bit when Power Rangers was coming out. We mentioned the fact that the same developers made a very similar game on mobile that was a fighting game that was using similar assets to Battle for the Grid, and Ryu and Chun-Li were in that game. There was already a space where this team had an opportunity to put these characters into like all of their franchise games. I think because of that, it was sort of like, oh, we sort of saw this coming. A cool concept. Both characters get like an 8.5. This is super sick, you know what I mean? The fact that they get their own custom Power Ranger costumes, that was still something that we already experienced when they were announced for Legacy Wars several years before. And then it starts to thin out quite a bit. I will argue that this ends up being very close to the beginning of like the guest character revolution. There is a time period here when I think we all knew that guest characters do very well for fighting games in general, but Tekken 7 was kind of like one of the biggest games and one of the biggest, I'd say, beneficiaries of that in almost a decade's worth of time. Almost a decade's worth of time. So at the very start, let's go with Akuma. Impossible. Granted, Street Fighter Cross Tekken had happened. Tekken Cross Street Fighter was effectively dead. But I was watching that tournament in Japan when Fated Retribution was being announced, and when Akuma's symbol shows up on the screen, it was such a bewildering, like, what in the holy dumb shit is happening? This is actually a massively insane and crazy addition, because at this point, Street Fighter Cross Tekken was a massive failure, right? And left everybody embarrassed and in shambles by the way that project was sort of like received. That this was ever going to get touched again. There was no way that Tekken was going to get anywhere close to Street Fighter, and then they handle it in the best way possible by pissing off every Tekken fan for the next 7 years straight. 10 out of 10. What happens next is another, I'd say, comparable 10 out of 10. Because we did not know where guest characters could really go in this time frame and what could happen. The moment of Geese being revealed at EVO and the build up and the lead up to it was huge. Like, the energy in the room was insane. That, like, wait a minute, like an SNK character, like another 2D character in Like, holy shit. People went friggin' nuts, dude. So this is also clearly a 10 out of 10, but it sort of begins the massive influx of guest characters in most fighting games from this point forward. There's a reason why there's so many guests in the games we were just talking about, and it's because of the success that some of these characters have overall and the impact and the virality of what happens in Tekken 7. In the same way, Noctis was also like, what the hell? This is impossible. This is crazy. I mean, were we all specifically really into Final Fantasy 15 at the time? No. But FF15 was obviously a big game. Noctis showing up in Tekken was just like, what in the shit is going on? What the? It was crazy. This is also another 10 out of 10 situation. Was the character I ended up playing in Tekken 7 just in totality, just because he was like a Soul Calibur character in Tekken. It was so friggin' weird. I end up finding out later, of all the DLC characters in Tekken, Noctis was ridiculously successful. Further cementing the fact that like the standalone sales for like DLC characters and season passes and stuff, Noctis did very well. Yeah, you have to give him credit. This was a pretty big deal and shifted sort of everyone's perception of what Tekken 7 is. Geese was the layup, and like Noctis was the slam dunk because these happened within like 4 months of each other. This was the point when Tekken 7 now explodes for good reason. You know what I mean? We are still waiting for effectively like this moment in Tekken 8 because we haven't gotten it yet, dude. We have legit not had it happen yet. Characters that surprise and elate people as much as this shit did from Tekken 7. And that leads us to like maybe about like a year-ish later, and bam, Negan shows up, and I have to not give it a 10. I'm giving it a 9, and it is so high. Some people give it 4s and stuff. I get it, right? I understand why people want to give it low ratings, like 1s and 2s. I understand why that is. As someone that's not even a Walking Dead fan, I've never even seen an episode of Walking Dead. I give them a 9. You know why? What the hell are we even looking at? What are we even looking at? What the crossing over to something in that way had never really existed in fighting games before, where it's just like the most out of left field, like Obama's the next character. We don't even know what the hell's going on. Like, it was so mind-bending that you still look at it and go, what the hell? So to me, like, just on that premise alone, I give that shit like a 9 out of 10. And not even the way he plays, his execution, like all that kind of stuff, because yeah, he was kind of an annoying character in the game. But I just think in terms of like, this bitch isn't even a video game character, dude. Wait a minute, is nothing off the table now? You know, at least with all these characters, they're video game characters. And then goddamn young Sheldon shows up. DOA 5. So how many was it in total in DOA 5? It was Akira, it was Sarah, it was Pi, and it was Jackie. And then eventually it was also Mai, which is all I think delisted now. I think this was really crazy at the time. So Virtua Fighter and Dead or Alive crossing over. Yeah, with I think perspective and time, that doesn't seem that crazy, relatively speaking. Like Dead or Alive was literally created on the bones of Virtua Fighter, like all other 3D games were. But still, I think with so much time passing and how much happened in this time frame, like around the mid 2010s when this shit happened, it is really sick. I think the inclusion of all of this stuff and how unexpected it was is, I think I would say about an 8.5. Personally, this is all about an 8.5 that, oh, now DOA is also a guest character game and Virtua Fighter's crossing over with it. That's pretty sick, man. This is actually really cool. I love it. For me personally, I think about an 8.5 for all the Virtua Fighters. And then my showing up is about the same rating because they ended up going in a different direction. You know, proper characters showing up from something that isn't close to this franchise at all. Even though DOA and Virtua Fighter have a history. Still about an 8.5. Mai's really cool. And of course, you know, Mai, Shiranui, Dead or Alive. If we're just talking about what Dead or Alive is historically as a game and who Mai is historically as a character, you know what? I think I'm bumping it up. It's about a 9. The match made in heaven. And this, I legit forgot happened. Cool. You know, it's about a 7. There's mostly like, oh, so we're still gonna have like a girl character. We're gonna do the same thing we did before. They had an opportunity to put like Kyo or some shit in here. They did. And I don't think she looks bad particularly, but I think in terms of like what it ended up being, it was like, wow, that's neat, but it's like maybe a 7? That doesn't help that I mostly forgot that she was there. So Who would be considered technically a guest character? I'd say outside of the DC universe, okay? Injustice is a DC game, so anything that's outside of the typical DC publication, just in general, and also not historically NRS, right? Because even though I get it, Raiden and Sub-Zero are here and Scorpion. Should we consider those? Maybe we should. Why not? Because we have not considered like SNK characters showing up from other SNK games or Street Fighter characters showing up from other if this was the case, then we would be throwing in like Akira, rival school shit. But we don't, because it's in the same wheelhouse, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's the same IP owned by the same studio. For that reason, let's not talk about entirely Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and Raiden. Guest character-wise in here, I think it ends up being Ninja Turtles and Hellboy. That's it, right? Okay, so Ninja Turtles is a 10 out of 10. Straight up. It's just a 10 out of 10. It's like the characters coming back in fighting game respect. They haven't been in a fighting game in like forever. I think the Ninja Turtles, their execution, that trailer was just like, oh my God, is it legendary status 10 out of 10? Maybe not like that high. It's not a cloud or something like that, but still, personally speaking, that was a huge deal where it's like, fuck, this is crazy. This is such a cool, they're all the same character too. This is so cool. So that's an easy 10 out of 10. Hellboy and the execution of Hellboy is about like an 8.5. I don't think it's that high. And he doesn't really lean into anything crazy gameplay wise either, except his big jump. The Ninja Turtles were nuts. We're gonna fit 4 characters on 1 character type of shit, you know? Hellboy's cool, but ultimately is like, oh, that's a neat addition. Nice crossover sort of thing. Cool idea. But I don't think it really reaches into the mega highs like the 9s and stuff like that. I think it's about an 8.5. BB Tag. Yeah, what the hell's in BB Tag? Ruby is obviously the one I'm thinking of. Is there anything else that's like crazy outside of the wheelhouse? Senran Kagura. All right, let me see if I can actually find the Senran Kagura character in here. Is it her? Blitztank? Is Blitztank not from... Is Akatsuki Blitzcomp also not something that... Not Arxis? Damn. Really? Not ASW? Bottom left next to Heart. This is Senran Kagura character? I think it's unfair for me to rate anything in BlazBlue Cross Tag. I'm just gonna get everything an 8. Here's my only perspective here. Ruby was not a game. Like, was an existing franchise, obviously, you know, created, was a part of like shorts and a series and stuff. Like, to me, this wasn't even anything related to some of this stuff on here that were in games. It was a show, you know? It was a fan-made show on YouTube, The Creator Pass. Like, I understand all that history of it. To me, that's crazy. I'd actually argue that, like, Ruby being in this game, even though I know dick about it, I know what that is, though, and that showing up is mad surprising. So to me, that might be like, I'd argue the Ruby inclusion could be a 9, relatively speaking. Everything else in here sort of comes from games in the game space. A completely different anime thing was like dropped in here, so you know. I can acknowledge that that was nuts. I was like, whoa, what the hell? I know what that is, man. Like, but that's crazy that that's in here. That's so cool. Fighting EX Layer. All right, so in Fighting EX Layer, Terry Bogard shows up, and I still remember the Evo which this was announced. You know, this makes sense. I still think it makes sense. This is still early Terry dominance. This actually started before Smash, technically. Either way, he's fun. I played it. I did some trials. I had some fun with him. I will say is about an 8. The only problem with that, Fighting EX Layer, like as a game, is overall kind of like an 8 sort of game too. If guest characters show up in this, would this be like such a huge, massive deal? It also kind of depends on which game it is. You know what I mean? So I still give it about an 8. Mortal Kombat X. We're getting to the end of this goddamn thing. And I got so excited for so many characters that my ass is exhausted now. All right, so here we go. This was the period where NRS truly leaned into guest characters. I get it, MK9 did have guests, but this is when this shit really popped off, dude. Because this game gets Jason, Predator, Alien, and Leatherface. And only one in there isn't like almost legendary status, only one. Jason. Jason in a fighting game. 10 out of 10, it's so cool. Like one variation and then 2, they all have crazy different gimmicks and execution. He looks so friggin', bro, it's Jason in a game. This is so nuts, dude. I have to give Jason a 10 out of 10. And then he's followed up by Predator. which is legendary status 10 out of 10. I remember asking friends that were a part of the development team early on about like Predator stuff. Was he saucy? Is it fun? Did they give him a lot of really cool stuff? And they're like, he's unbelievable, dude. You won't even be ready for this shit. Like Predator in a fighting game, finally. There's such a hardcore like Predator fan base, just overall legendary status, dude. Absolutely 10 out of 10. Alien, 11 out of 10. Greatest, probably a 9. I'll be honest, I love Alien and I like the Xenomorph and all that stuff, but I think ultimately the way the aliens sort of came out didn't really hit in the same ways that Jason and Predator did. Proportions look kind of weird. Kind of really looks like a dude in a suit. Doesn't really move like an animal in any way. Like, he's just kind of like a weird Baraka alien. So for me, you know, I will say that overall, Alien's a 9. Still really high. Still like, you know, super up there in terms of the pantheon of everything. But I think one of the things that makes Alien special is the fact that Predator is in the game. And they fulfill the ultimate classic crossover. Alien is enhanced in this game from Predator, right? Which is why Predator still gets such a high consideration in total, you know? Leatherface. Cool. He's an 8. I think gameplay-wise is what gives him the 8. Otherwise, he would be kind of like a 6. But I think Leatherface gameplay-wise, like chainsaw cancels and stuff like that, oh shit, bro. Gameplay-wise, it might be actually one of the coolest characters in the game. Super high-quality guest characters in Mortal Kombat X, you know? I'm gonna cover as much guest characters as I can with the perspective that I do. The only issue is that, like, I've only played so many games. Soul Calibur 5, though. Ezio Auditore, the premier selling character of Soul Calibur 5. At this point, all these Soul Calibur games, ever since 2, get their big premier character, and that character is the one that's going to set the game forward. I think it's better than Jerry, and I think it fits perfectly because we have a character that is literally imbued in history. The whole point of Soul Calibur is like history's like legendary fighters retold type shit. So it's perfect. I still think it's an 8 to an 8.5, to the point where I don't think it did the game a huge amount of favors. It fits, but it's kind of like, yeah, okay. So it's like an 8 to an 8.5. And his gameplay was really cool. He had a gun, you know? Wait, does PlayStation All-Stars even count? I will say, what characters in here even shocked or caused enough surprise that made me go like, oh man, that character's in there? That's really surprising. BioShock guy, Big Daddy, but it's still like a 7 or an 8. Dante showing up was pretty surprising, but it's a 7. And then anything else in here? I think Raiden was also like, oh, this is like kind of an 8. That's sort of cool. Heihachi, I guess, would technically be in there too, but that's kind of like a 6. Street Fighter Cross Tekken, y'all's favorite game. Everybody's favorite game, right? There he is. Look at Cole McGrath's goofy ass face. So this is actually the main guest character I wanted to talk about in here. They put Cole, a PS3 sort of exclusive Sony side character that is only available on the Sony side of systems. They sort of take a note from OG Soul Calibur here. And Cole McGrath as a guest character from Infamous, to me felt like kind of like a 6. It feels like the most out of left field, but not in a good way. You know how we like talk about things are shocking and out of left field in unexpected ways, but they hit? Things can be out of left field in unexpected ways that I don't know if they hit entirely. I think it helped the game more than it did nothing for it. I think it helped. But still, it was an odd inclusion. I would definitely had hovered some different characters, which leads us to Mortal Kombat 9. Some of the earliest inclusions of guest characters, just straight up. Actual kind of bonkers guest characters goes to MK9 because Freddy and Kratos, I think, are hella smart. It isn't smart that Kratos is exclusively on PlayStation, but Freddy being like, oh wow, we're going into like the horror route, which Mortal Kombat had not entirely done in the past. Like, oh, horror themed fighting game. And they really lean into that obviously with MKX. Was a really cool idea. I think ultimately the problem with Freddy and why I don't give him a huge, I'd say, rating, like high rating, is because his gameplay, what it ended up being, he was very good, but man, he is designed as being like the most annoying character in the world. Like his ground claws and all that stuff, his projectiles were really rough to watch. And I think ultimately ended up making him like banned. So I think I give him a 9. Conceptually, like a really cool idea. Very surprising when it came out. Not a huge Freddy fan, but I will say it's like, whoa, a horror-themed fighting game. That's really cool. Kratos is interesting in Mortal Kombat 9. I think I want to give him a 9. And he gets his own stage. But mechanically speaking, he's really simple as far as like how a character is, even compared to like other MK9 characters at the time. He's fun and he's cool, but did they lean into how crazy these characters get in the same way that they do in Mortal Kombat X? They don't. I do think he definitely helped the game in total, right? He definitely helped the game in as far as popularity and everything like that, which I think gives him a 9. But I also give Kratos the same rating in the other fighting game, Soul Calibur, Broken Destiny. And I believe this was sometime before this. A couple years before, Soul Calibur 4 has a variety of guest characters, which we're just about to talk about. But Kratos was in it. And that's why I don't think Kratos was as crazy surprising as a character, where it's like, oh, we're doing Kratos as a guest character on a PlayStation system again? But even in this consideration, I only gave about a 9, right? He gets about a 9. He's cool, and that is a really good idea, but it felt like he was relegated to just the PSP version, and that version was obviously like a toned down version of Soul Calibur 4 to fit on the PSP. So it didn't really feel like this was given its true comeuppance in some way. I have a lot of deep opinions about Soul Calibur 4. The game looks amazing, but it kind of plays like absolute shit. But I was there in like, what was it, 07, 08, when this announcement happened at a friend's store, and somebody was on the internet in their store. It was a game store, right? And I remember hearing that Darth Vader is in Soul Calibur 4. What the hell? That's kind of like the level of, we didn't expect this to ever go in that direction ever. It's now crossed over into films and stuff like that. It was nuts. I get it. The black PlayStation gets Vader, the green Xbox gets Yoda. Okay, that was stupid. And Yoda, I think effectively is like a 7 out of 10 character that they chose. And Yoda just kind of like fucked up the game. I give Yoda like, honestly, it's going down. I give him like a 6. I give him a 5. It's going down actively. I don't think this really does anything, right? I think this just sort of pisses me off the more I think about it. But the concept of Vader and like Star Wars characters showing up in general in Soul Calibur, it's such a huge ass game changer around the mid 2000s that this really was like, whoa, dude, this is where guest characters could go. To me, this sort of set up for things like Tekken. So for me personally, I think Vader, believe it or not, is a 10 out of 10. And then Starkiller is maybe an 8.5, where it's like, yeah, there was the Force Unleashed game. They were tying it into the Force Unleashed. I think Starkiller was ultimately one of the more playable characters that they sort of had in there. But it was like, oh, okay, so he's like, nobody was fully committed to Starkiller being a brand new character to Star Wars at the time. This is pre, the multi-sequels. And it was like, yeah, okay, cool. That is cool that he's in there. Dengenki Buko Fighting Clan. Look at this roster. Like, look at this roster of all these super anime. What the fuck? Akira in Fighting Climax was pretty crazy. I remember playing him in the game, and I actually kind of wanted to play the game because of it. So I got to give it credit where it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to check this out because Akira was in it. Gave me that kind of a response, but like Akira as a guest character, even in this time frame, isn't that huge. Like, who does this appeal towards, Doesn't really come across as anything that I can... It's for 40-year-old men. It's like an 8.5, right? I want to personally give it an 8.5 as like an arcade boomer. I'll do it, but it was definitely a weird inclusion. I got to give it some props. This is a weird-ass inclusion. I think a lot of people even forgot that this shit happened. This is a real-life screenshot, PC Gaming Magazine. So, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not familiar with your game. DOA 4 Master Chief had a unique moveset, or was it just a skin? But is it Master Chief? It's like a female Spartan. It's important that we have to communicate to people that, don't worry, there's a pair of tits under there. This is Dead or Alive. This character had a unique moveset. I don't remember this being that huge. I didn't play this that much, not enough to really have an impression, but I don't remember this being like a huge deal when it came out. To me, it was like cool, but not like massive. This one I don't really know if I have an opinion on. The crossover with like Master Chief stuff, much less not Master Chief stuff. So we have to hover around the generic 8 out of 10 situation. I think at this point, we're all the way back to Soul Calibur 2. I think we're at the start. Oh my God. We have to cut it off here. This is the second to last one. And this is it, okay? Cutting it off, second to last one. Lars was in some PS2 I'm sorry, PS3, Xbox 360 era Naruto Buji no Jutsu game. He gets this costume also, like later on in like Tekken Tag 2 or some shit. I'm still confused by this. I think I've introduced people to this even existing. That is Lars Alexanderson, effectively cosplaying as an anime character in a Naruto game. I would argue that this feels like one of the most random things we have come across in this entire list. I understand why. I understand why this character's here. I don't agree with it. I don't think the impact of some Chinese MOBA game is going to have on, you know, whatever. Yeah, I get, but I understand what's going on here. I got to give it credit. It still haunts my mind that this happened in some way. It's weird. I'll give it a 7, okay? We're back to the stage of history. Effectively the pinnacle in the moment that this starts being a thing. True guest characters. We're not talking about a character from this showing up in that, or a character from, you know, one side of the thing crossing the pond over here, that are a part of the same franchise, much less company and stuff like that. No. We're gonna take shit that is so out there and inject them into our fighting game. The ultimate situation is Soul Calibur 2. And granted, I don't even know if Heihachi technically counts here, because it's like, oh, he's the same company. But then you have the obvious crazy one, which is Link and Spawn. And yeah, Spawn had some games, I get it, but not entirely known as being a video game character, mostly known for being a movie character, much less a comic book character, right? So Heihachi, I think, is disappointing. And what could have been on the PlayStation 2 side of things is actually, if we're going to judge him on his merits of being one of the OG original guest characters, is actually kind of disappointing. And probably is about like a 5 or a 6. It seems like a very weird choice for Soul Calibur. If not, I would put in any other Tekken character, personally speaking. So he's a weird pick, and it made the PlayStation version kind of one of the least appealing versions of Soul Calibur, just in general. But we know why. For anybody that doesn't know who the initial guest character was on the PlayStation side, it was Cloud Strife. In the last months, they were not able to put Cloud in, some licensing thing happened, and they had to put in Heihachi instead, which is one of the craziest old stories ever in this industry. When that was eventually revealed, it was like, what? No wonder Heihachi feels so weird. Link in Soul Calibur begins the dream of like, this thing can happen for this game. This character from this thing can show up in this game. You know, I talk about like Marvel versus Capcom is a franchise built on the idea of like guest characters and dreams coming true and shit, but it is controlled. It is like Marvel and Capcom and everything therein, so it's kind of wide in the same way that Smash eventually does this too. It's kind of wide, the breadth that can entail. But Soul Calibur putting Link in a game is crazy and was a massive industry-shaking moment that we are still feeling to this day, where developers, including Sakurai and Harada and Mortal Kombat, everybody is trying to pick up what effectively Link did to Soul Calibur 2 in the early 2000s, in like 2001, 2002 or some shit. The problem was that the GameCube version wouldn't inherently be the most desirable because it had one of the worst controllers for Soul Calibur, but still would be one of the best-selling versions because this is the best version of Soul Calibur, like without a doubt. So to me, this is 10 out of 10 legendary status. I'd argue probably gets the highest nomination. If we're to put this thing on a pantheon in terms of where things deserve to go, I think Link is at the peak. This was so big. Spawn, I think, is about an 8. And the only reason I think Spawn is an 8 is because he's got a weird-ass gameplay style. It's like they really didn't know what the hell to do with his gameplay because he couldn't have a cloak. He's got an axe that's all funky. You know, it always was a weird tell. I think Link takes the top, right? We're not doing anything more. And oh, Jesus Christ, there's one more. Noromaru, this is random as fuck. This is arguably one of the most random thing ever. Why is it one of the most random things ever? Because we don't have any idea in the 90s who the hell this guy is. Nobody really even learns that this bitch is around for the most part until emulation shows up like years later, and you emulate the arcade version and you're like, who the hell's this guy? What is this shit? What is going on? So this is only a thing that really exists inside Japan, you know, and you have to like educate people. Granted, he came back in the year of our Lord 2024. It's like if Weird Al was in Virtua Fighter 2. 8 out of 10. And then the actual OG one, Chad has reminded me, this scaly bitch, the actual true OG one. And you're right. You're right. granted, doesn't get a crazy high rating because it's also like a Japanese specific thing that barely anybody has ever heard of. It's like a manga character, and nobody knew what the hell this in like the mid 90s and shit. It's like so weirdly niche and odd. So to me, this is genuinely weird and random. Like truly weird and random. But I give Gon some extra credit where he was actually playable, and a lot of people were introduced to him in this time frame because he was in the worldwide version of the game. So I give Gon like probably a 9. You're reminding me of a couple more, and I'm so done. Pepsi Man was in Fighting Vipers years before Gon. Jesus Christ, dude. I'm gonna be here for the rest of my life. This would be the equivalent of like the McDonald's Moon Man showing up in Street Fighter 1. 10 out of 10, best character ever. Can't believe it, how high quality it is. Earthworm Jim was in Battle Arena Toshinden? What the fuck? I'm done. I'm done. I'm gonna be here for the rest of my fucking life. All right, chat, this was a cool video idea. Neat list. Cool list, right? Okay. I'm officially out of my league now. Have a good one. Shine on. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Jesus. God damn.